Okay, so this is the next video in our Unit 8, 1945 to 1989, in which the world went through not only the Cold War, but also decolonization. So today, what we're talking about is the effects of the Cold War. How did the disagreements over the end of World War II over self-determination and this ideological struggle for allies in the third world to fulfill political and economic nationalism, how did it affect the world? So essentially, just to review, what caused the Cold War? The primary and the secondary causes. Secondary cause would be the end of World War II, because both the United States and the Soviet Union had different points of view about the conquered land. The United States came in as the liberator. We're giving you your freedom. We're giving you, the opportunity to create your own life as you see fit. And the Soviet Union viewed the conquered land as we liberated you, we're going to make you communists, and we're going to use you for our benefit. So what it boils down to is that there was different views on self-determination. But these two things were caused by the different ideologies, communism versus capitalism, and authoritarianism versus democracy. Essentially, what you have with communism is the goal to spread communism around the world. So when you would go to a land, you would make sure that they adopted a communist economy and an authoritarian government. The United States, on the other hand, sought to promote freedom and sought to promote capitalism. So this really is the primary causes, because what was happening is that the Soviet Union was trying to win friends who adopted their ideology and essentially helped their political nationalism and also their economic nationalism through creating a communist economic system between nations for market resources and investments. The United States was very similar in the fact that the United States wanted to promote individual freedoms in an enlightened government, but also capitalism with trade without any restrictions to kind of help their economy too. And what they're doing is they're competing for the third world nations. So specifically, the next step is to be able to explain the effects of the Cold War. And you're going to show your understanding through doing an SAQ. Now, if you're watching this because you're absent, you're going to have to schedule some time to come do the SAQ in one of the tutorials. So the very first thing is we're going to identify the non-aligned movement, which is, to me, the most important effect. And I'll get into that in just a second. Then on your own is you're going to go through some documents to generate the goals of the non-aligned movement. And essentially at the very end, you're going to schedule some time to take that SAQ. So the non-aligned movement was essentially, to me, the greatest effect. I know that there was a nuclear arms race. I know that you have proxy wars. I know that you have all this espionage going on. I also know that you have, the world, United Nations, and things like that. But to me, the greatest effect was the non-aligned movement. The non-aligned movement, to kind of give you a definition of it, was essentially a group of nations who not only opposed the Cold War, but they're seeking to work together to promote alternatives to the existing economic, political, and social orders, meaning that they're not going to choose a side. They're going to try to work together in an effort to, not get involved in the Cold War. So this movement occurred or began in the Bandung Conference in 1955, in which a group of nations from Europe, Africa, and Asia banded together and choose to stay neutral, working together to keep world peace. And their hope was for collaboration among nations of the third world to promote their economic development, to promote their survival, and reduce their reliance on the United States or Soviet Union. So when we look at it, during the Cold War, non-aligned countries were those that rejected alliances with either the United States or the Soviet Union. And at first, they desired not to be tied to either superpower. Because when you take money from the Soviet Union or when you take money from the United States, there is certain things that you're going to have to fulfill. The money does not come freely. And when we look at this map, the members shown in very dark navy blue, well, these were former colonies. And so what they're doing is they're looking at the spread of ideology in the Cold War as just a continuation of the indirect imperialism that the Western nations had used before. This was led by a leader by the name of Marshal Tito, T-I-T-O, from Yugoslavia, Nehru from India, Kwame Nkrumah from Africa, Ghana, General Abdul Nasser from Egypt, and then finally, President Sukarno, who's the organizer of the conference and the president of Indonesia. All 5 of these leaders sought to stay away from these entangling alliances that they viewed as imperialism and sought to work together to keep world peace and continue economic development. So when we kind of stop and we review, the question at the beginning was essentially, what were the effects of the Cold War? And we know that there's a nuclear arms race. We know that there's espionage. We know that there's proxy wars. But one of the most unique and important effects was the non-aligned movement. The non-aligned movement was when nations and groups in Africa and Asia chose to stay out of the Cold War, remaining neutral, not entering into an alliance with the United States or the Soviet Union, and working together to keep the peace and to promote economic development. This was created at the Bandung Conference in 1955. And what the goal was collaboration among those nations in the third world to reduce their reliance upon not only the United States, but also North America. Now, the next step is to essentially download the DBQ. Now, in the DBQ, the question's kind of tricky, but what it's asking you to do 2 things. One is literally saying, what were the goals of the non-aligned movement? And then the second thing that it's doing, it's asking you how they changed. So by reading through those docs, you should be able to list the 4 or 5 main goals of the non-aligned movement. And you should also be able to understand how they evolved between 1945 and 1989. When you're done with that, get back with me and schedule some time to take the SAQ.